Hello students, it's your history teacher and I'm here with another online lecture today with two topics, De-Stalinization and development in China after 1945. The first of all, we'll take a look at the process of De-Stalinization. Well, it consisted of a series of political reforms in the USSR after the death of a long-time dictator Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin in 1953. I want you to remember this year, okay? So I will ask you definitely when the Stalin died, because we can say that this is a huge turning point. To 1953. These political reforms were brought by his successor, Nikita Khrushchev, when he got to the power. These reforms consisted of changing, removing key institutions that helped Stalin hold the power. Mostly it was the cult of personality that was greatly criticized by the Khrushchev. Also the Stalinist political system and the Gulag labor camp system. So these three were the main sides that the Nikita Khrushchev wanted to get rid of. Well, although he initiated this process, we can't take him as some kind of savior and liberal, because even though he wanted to de-Stalinize the country, that in fact made the Soviet society less repressive, Khrushchev was authoritarian in his own way. Okay, so he didn't really want to free everybody and to want to change the system. He just wanted to get rid of the remains of Stalin and to do it in his own way. Okay, so you just can't say it that way that the Stalin was a bad guy and Khrushchev was a good guy. It's more complicated. Khrushchev, for example, crushed the revolt in Hungary in 1956 and approved the construction of the Berlin Wall. So although it seemed kind of optimistic to the future, the examples of Hungary, Poland, and also Czechoslovakia say that no serious changes were allowed in satellites. So situation changed just a little bit, mostly the cult of personality, Stalinist political system, and Gulag labor camp system. However, it's still very important because the Khrushchev was the first one who started to criticize that system that Stalin built. You know, in the 20th Congress speech, Nikita Khrushchev painted a graphic picture of the regime of suspicion, fear, and terror, in his words. He also said that he wanted to break the Stalin cult that has held Soviet citizens in its thrall for 30 years. Khrushchev described the purges that were happening during the period of 1936 and 1938. He implied that one of Stalin's most trusted aides, Kirov, had been assassinated in 1934 at the leader's behest. So this was really the first time when somebody dared to criticize the great Stalin, man of steel, okay, his successor. And moreover, he revealed some of Stalin's deeds in the past. Okay, so this is the process of de-Stalinization that was going on in 50s. And you can also see in the picture the head of the Stalin, because during that time a lot of statues of Stalin were destroyed. This picture was taken in Budapest, so it's from the streets of Budapest, but also, for example, the Great Stalin Memorial that was in Prague was destroyed as well. But I didn't find some great pictures from that event. Tam ten pamätník v Prahe, a pokiaľ ste boli v Prahe, určite viete, ktoré miesto budem myslieť. Stále sa to vlastne volá Stalin, čiže vlastne idete na Stalina. Je to Letná a teraz je tam vlastne taký veľký metronóm. ten tam bol daný vlastne ako náhrada. Pokiaľ ste aj videli napríklad film Pelíšky, bola tam taká scéna, kedy ten pán Kraus, taký, ktorý bol väčšinou času veľmi nervózny, ukazoval model, kedy vymýšľal, že čo by sa tam mohlo dať na miesto Stalina. Lebo ten podstavec sochy tam vlastne stále zostal a on vlastne prišiel s tým návrhom, že by tam teda mohlo byť v podstate lietadlo a tak ďalej. Áno. Takže to bola tiež jedna z takých ikonických scén, ktorá vlastne symbolizovala zrovna, to bolo to obdobie, kedy tam nestálo nič, potom sa tam dal ten metronom, čiže po satelitoch a vlastne aj v Sovietskom zväze sa ničili sochy Stalina, niektoré, pretože sa tým ničil ten jeho kult osobnosti. Okay. So that's it for the de-Stalinization, and we will move to China and Maoism, or the development after 1945. Well, so the first thing, what is Maoism? It is a branch of the communist ideology that developed in China after the World War II. It differs from Marxism and Leninism in that peasantry should be communist vanguard rather than proletariat. Okay, so in Marxism-Leninism, the ruling class should be the dictatorship of the proletariat. But in China, it should be the peasantry who will rule the country. Okay? Well, how this ideology settled in China? Well, China was economically suffering after World War II because of the effect of the decades of fighting in Asia. So we know that it was invaded by the Japanese and there was really a lot of fighting. And during that fighting, many mines and factories were destroyed. It was one of the most virulent inflation in the history. Okay, the one in China. And as you know, the poverty in the damaged country is the fertile soil for communism. So when Mao Zedong came to the power in 1949, the US-Chinese relations were worsening, plus the Korean War, that we will mention on the next lesson, contributed to the mutual enmity. So this was the relation between the United States and China. China and the USSR, on the other hand, were allies because of the same ideology, but after some time, China started to dislike the policies of the USSR and mostly Nikita Khrushchev. China blamed the USSR for abandoning the strict policies of Stalin and Lenin because, in fact, the Maoism was stricter than communism in the USSR and the Eastern Bloc after the Stalin's death. So after the process of de-Stalinization began. Okay, so when I will ask you in the 50s, what communist regime was stricter, Maoism or Russian communism? It was definitely Maoism. Okay, but only after like 1950. After the Communist Revolution, China was transformed into a very cruel communist dictatorship. Everything in the country was subordinated to the Maoist ideology. Economy was socialist and traditional Chinese culture was repressed. As you know, communism wants to get rid of the spiritual aspects of life, so atheism was enforced and religious and political opponents were being killed in masses. Well known is the attack on Tibet by China and its following annexation. This was mostly because, as we know, the Tibet is, like the holy land of Buddhism. And China and its people were very spiritual. They worshipped their ancestors and so on. And from now on, they were very strongly atheist country. So all of that Chinese traditions were repressed because of the ideological differences between the USSR and China. The Sino-Soviet split happened. So after 1959, China and the USSR stopped their alliance because of the ideological differences and interpretations of Marxism and Leninism. The USSR was viewed as lax and more liberal by China, which was in favor of very strict policies. Okay, so that's it for today's lesson. I will do a quick revision. So you should know that when Joseph Stalin died in 1953, he was succeeded by Nikita Khrushchev, and he began the process of de-Stalinization. It was a series of political reforms that should change or remove key institutions that helped Stalin hold his power. This was cult of personality, Stalinist political system, Gulag, labor camp system. Khrushchev was not really the saint and liberal. He still was authoritarian in his own way. For example, he crushed the revolt in Hungary in 1956 and improved construction of the Berlin Wall. He still would not allow any changes in satellites. Okay, this can also be a question. In his speech, he revealed that the regime of Stalin was a regime of suspicion, fear, and terror, what a lot of people in the West world knew, but Nikita Khrushchev was the first one to say that in the USSR. So he was the very first person to criticize Stalin in the Soviet Union. He also revealed a lot of secrets that were in behind, like purges and assassinations. China and Maoism. Maoism is a branch of communist ideology, but the ruling class is peasantry, so not the proletariat like in the Russian communism. China had the communist ideology, so Maoist ideology mostly because it was destroyed during the World War II, and there was a huge inflation. The main political leader was Mao Zedong, who was the Chinese Stalin. US-Chinese relations got worse, of course, but the Chinese-USSR's relations got worse after some times as well. This was after the Stalin died. China blamed USSR for abandoning the strict policies of Stalin and Lenin. So you should know that Maoism in the 1950s was stricter than Russian communism because of these differences. Okay, so that's it. So please study this on a regular basis. Watch their videos, write it to your notes, and until another online lecture, bye.